My family celebrated my birthday without me. Yes, just like you heard, without me, without my presence, without my name on the list, without my chair at the table, but with my money. Because, irony of ironies, I was the one who paid for the party. And I found out in the worst possible way. From my couch at home, in slippers, with a half-warm glass of wine and my phone in hand, watching my granddaughter post Instagram stories where everyone, my children, my grandkids, even my sister-in-law, whom I can't stand, sang "Happy Birthday" in front of a huge cake with the number 70 stuck right in the middle. A cake that, by the way, I myself had ordered the week before. For a second I thought I must be dreaming, or that the app had gone crazy and was showing me an old memory. But no. People were wearing the clothes I'd seen on them that very day in a group photo, fresh flowers, string lights, brand new glasses. It was real. And I, the guest of honor, was in my living room, alone, with the remote control and a cat that wasn't even mine, because it belongs to my neighbor and sneaks in whenever it smells food. Suddenly, someone in the video asks, "Where's Grandma?" And you can hear my daughter-in-law's voice, that sweetness wrapped in poison, saying, "Oh no, poor thing, she goes to bed early, she doesn't like noise." I froze. Me, who has survived 3 moves, 2 unmedicated births, and an inheritance war, was being officially declared a harmless old lady. The woman who used to organize Christmases, dinners, everybody's birthdays, reduced to a polite excuse. I turned off the phone and laughed. Yes, I laughed, with that bitter laugh that comes out when your heart burns, but you've still got a little pride standing. I poured another drink, lifted the glass toward the dark TV, and toasted with myself. "Happy birthday, Claire. You've won the Oscar for Best No-Show." I didn't cry. Not yet. I just felt that hollow, behind the sternum where family love used to go. And I thought, if they erased me from the picture, it's because they're afraid I still have something to say. While the wine warmed in the glass, I remembered I myself had left a deposit at the Riverside Gardens Hall, the one where they were now toasting. It almost struck me as funny. Months preparing everything for my big day, and I ended up being the ghost guest. I love ironies when they don't hurt so much. For a moment I was tempted to call, to scream, to write something in the family group chat. But when I looked for the group, it wasn't there anymore. The Morris family group had disappeared from my chat list. I thought it had been deleted by mistake, but no, they had removed me. Literally, they had taken me out of my own digital family. So I laughed again, louder. Because if I've learned anything at this point in life, it's that silence hurts, but it's also useful. And if there's something I know how to do, it's wait for the right moment. I didn't sleep that night. I walked around the house, barefoot, lights off, mentally reviewing every detail of the last few weeks. My son's odd phrases, "Don't worry about anything, Mom." My daughter-in-law's calls that dropped the moment I asked about the menu. The usual excuses. Everything fit together like a jigsaw puzzle assembled with disdain. Outside, it rained. The sound of water hitting the shutters was like an ironic applause. And there, between the smell of damp and anger, I knew something had changed. It wasn't just a party. It was a line in the sand. So, yes, my family celebrated my birthday without inviting me, but they didn't know I had paid for every damn toast, every flower, every canapé. And the best part, or the worst, depending on how you see it, is that they still had no idea what was going to happen next. But before I go on with my story, I'm very curious to know from where in the world and at what time you're joining today. I'd love to read you in the comments. Because if I've learned anything in this life, it's that there's always someone on the other side listening, and sometimes that's enough to not feel so alone. Back to my business. That night, while the clock struck 11 and the applause died down on the other side of the phone, I made a decision. I wasn't going to complain. I wasn't going to ask for explanations. I was going to watch, to listen, to wait for their own lies to do the job for me. Because, believe me, children can forget to invite you, but they never notice when you stop protecting them. And that, darling, is the real party that was yet to begin. The next day I woke up early, with that lucidity that sometimes arrives after a sleepless night. The house smelled like old coffee and a Sunday's silence. I put on a robe, opened the curtains, and let in the gray light of dawn. In that instant, I had the absurd hope that it had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe the party was another one, maybe the video was old, maybe there was still a little respect left in that family. I turned on the phone to look for some explanation, but the first thing I noticed was the absence. The Morris family group had vanished from the chat list. It didn't appear even in archived messages. It was as if it had never existed. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, incredulous, with the feeling that someone had erased me from the family history with a single click. I tried searching my son's name, then my daughter-in-law's, but nothing. Digital silence. I saw them online because of course they were connected, but there were no new messages for me. Not one. Not a, "Thanks for the gift." Not a, "We missed you at the party." Not a ridiculous emoji. Nothing. It was official. They had erased me, not only from the table, but from the conversation too. While I was still staring at the phone, the doorbell rang. It was Elsie, my neighbor and my only ally in the building. She arrived as always, with a bag of croissants and her chain smoker's laugh. "I brought you coffee," she said without saying hello. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I answered. "I saw a party." I told her everything while she opened the box and served the coffee, as if we were conspiring. Every time I mentioned a detail, Elsie arched an eyebrow, like someone who enjoys other people's drama but gets indignant as a sport. "They kicked you out of the group," she finally said, with that tone of sentence only old friends have. "Today that's worse than a divorce, darling," and without alimony I shot back. We laughed, but my laugh came out crooked. Elsie lit a cigarette at the window and looked at me with that mix of affection and fury only she can put in a glance. "Listen, Clarita, you are not going to sit here crying. If they did that to you, you give it back to them. But with style. No cheap drama, no insults. Observe, wait, and when it's time, strike with white gloves." I nodded without yet knowing how. While she talked, I remembered something. A few weeks ago, I'd left Veronica, my daughter-in-law, a copy of my card to make it easier to book the venue. I'd done it out of trust, not imagining trust was precisely the mistake. I froze. "Elsie, I think I paid for the party myself," I said slowly, almost whispering, as if saying it out loud would confirm it. "You're kidding," she replied, blowing smoke through her nose. "What do you mean you paid?" "I think so. I made the reservation. I gave them the card, and they never sent me the invoice. Then, darling, they bought the wine with your own money. That's a masterpiece of nerve." I took a sip of coffee and felt the bitter taste mix with rage. I got up and started rummaging through the drawers where I kept my important papers. I was looking for the receipt, any slip, something to confirm whether I'd been the idiot who financed my own humiliation. I couldn't find it. Just old invoices, electric bills, a calendar from last year, and the sensation of living inside a cruel joke. Elsie watched me from the table. "If you want, I'll help you dig, but calm down first. Vengeance with shaky hands never turns out well." I laughed without humor. She was right. We sat a while in silence, listening to the faraway noise of a neighbor hammering. That domestic music that reminds you the world goes on, even if yours is a mess. Later, when Elsie left, I was alone with my empty cup and a list of questions nobody was going to answer. Then I opened my email. And there, as if the universe had decided to have a little more fun with me, I found a new message. The sender was Anna Accounting. The subject read, "Invoice, Jardines Hall reservation." I didn't know any Anna, but opening the file made the floor shift beneath me. I won't spoil what that document said, because that belongs to the next move in this story. I'll just say that, seeing my name at the top and my card numbers at the bottom, I knew Elsie was right. They'd bought the party with my own money. I sat still, staring at the screen, heart torn between fury and disbelief. Outside, the sun began to slip in through the windows, and for a moment, I thought about closing the computer, making myself another cup of coffee, and pretending none of this was happening. But I couldn't. Because when a betrayal hits you like that, to the bone, silence becomes unbearable. So I sat down, took a deep breath, and decided that if they had erased me, I was going to start writing my version of the story. My way. With words, with calm, and with memory. Because the problem wasn't just that they didn't invite me. The problem was they believed I wouldn't notice. And that, my dears, is always a mistake. I opened the email once more, just to make sure I wasn't imagining what I saw. The subject was still there, clear and bright in the inbox. Invoice, Jardines Hall reservation. I opened it, and the screen threw my own name back at me in big letters. Client, Claire Morris. Card ending in 7,731. Total amount paid, 162,000. I stared at it with the coldness of someone contemplating her own crime. The most humiliating part wasn't the money, but the confirmation that they'd used my trust with a surgeon's precision. I set my elbows on the table, breathed slowly, and began to laugh. Slowly, too. A laugh that makes no sound, the laugh of someone who can't believe the stupidity around her. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't cry. Tears are a luxury I'm not giving to anyone who hasn't earned them. I opened the junk drawer and took out an old notebook, one of those hard-covered ones where I used to write shopping lists. I began to write, Hall, 162,000, catering, verify. Flowers, ask Veronica. A list of suspicions, my war list. I called the hall number that appeared on the invoice. A man with a friendly voice answered, as if he were always on the verge of a chuckle. Good afternoon, Jardines Hall. Raoul speaking. Good afternoon, Raoul. This is Mrs. Claire Morris. I think there's a mistake with an invoice. Ah, yes, the birthday lady. A lovely event. Lovely? I asked, holding the phone like a bomb. Could you tell me under whose name the reservation was made? Of course, here it is. Birthday of Mrs. Claire Morris. Reserved and paid by card. Event last Friday. A pleasure to host you. Such a charming family. I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. And do you recall any issues? Anything to mention? I asked, in a voice that didn't sound like mine. Nothing at all, ma'am. They even toasted to you. Very moving. I hung up slowly. I stayed with the receiver in my hand as if I could still return his words. They toasted to me, paid by me. How efficient. Rage rose from my stomach, to my eyes. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the organized nerve, the way they'd turned me into a polite anecdote. And yet, underneath all that indignation, something shifted. A calm curiosity. I wanted to see them. I needed to observe up close the crime scene. I changed clothes, put on a long coat, sunglasses that made me look invisible, and took the bus to the hall. The ride was an eternity wrapped in city noises. People murmuring, coins clinking, the smell of fresh bread from a corner bakery. I thought about every detail. The glasses clinking, the fake laughter, the toasts in my name. I pictured Veronica posing by the cake, Mark greeting guests with that politician's smile he got from his father. When I arrived, the same man from the phone greeted me. Raoul, tall, big-handed, with a kind of tired kindness in his eyes. Mrs. Morris? He asked, surprised. What a pleasure to see you. Are you here about something from the event? Yes, I left a scarf, silk, wine-colored, very important. He smiled, searching the storage room. Meanwhile, I scanned the empty hall, balloons still hanging, deflated, the 70 garland swaying in the fan's current, confetti scraps on the floor, and the sweet smell of spilled wine. It was like walking into a crime scene after the banquet. Raoul returned with a box and showed me a few forgotten things. A handkerchief, a broken glass, a napkin with a lipstick kiss. I didn't find any scarf, ma'am, but if you'd like I can check the event photos, maybe it appears on a table. I stood still. You have photos? Yes. We took some for the hall's portfolio, with your permission, of course. It was a beautiful celebration. I asked him to show me. On the computer screen, the images paraded. Mark toasting with his wife, my granddaughter hugging her boyfriend, my lifelong friends laughing at a table I had paid for. In one photo, behind the cake, was a sign with my name in gold letters. I felt like a ghost looking at her own portrait. Raoul noticed my silence and lowered his voice. "Excuse me, were you the honoree?" I held his gaze, half a smile. "Depends," I said. "Did they get emotional?" "Very." "Then no, that wasn't me. I don't remember how I got home. I only know I walked with my back straight, a dignity holding me up like an inner flame. Every step was a promise. I promised myself not to stay quiet, not this time, because silence is a weapon children use against their mothers when they no longer want to hear them. That night, I opened my notebook again, and under the expenses I wrote a phrase. "Respect is expensive, but I pay contempt only once." Then I shut the cover with resolve. I didn't know how, but I was going to do something. If they thought the old lady would sit knitting and crying, they were about to meet the real Claire Morris. That night, when I got home, the air felt different, as if everything were charged with a silent electricity. I left the coat on the chair, without even turning on the light. In the dark, the echo of the hall was still inside me. The lights, the glasses, the laughter still ringing in my head. I made tea without wanting it, just to have something to do with my hands. While the water boiled, I opened the sideboard drawer where I kept important papers. I was looking for an explanation, though I knew all I'd find was dust and a stack of neatly ordered disappointments. At the back, behind some old folders, a wooden box appeared that I hadn't opened in years. I took it out without thinking and set it on the table. When I opened it, the smell of old paper hit me like a physical memory. Inside were letters, clippings, black and white photos. I recognized my husband's handwriting on the envelopes. I hadn't seen that script in years, so firm, so sure, as if every word weighed just enough. I took out the first letter and opened it carefully, afraid the paper would crumble in my fingers. He'd written it when it was just starting his law practice. In it, my husband talked about a loan he had taken out to help the boy get going. He said he'd told me that we'd decided it together, that it was a family investment. But I didn't remember it. In the next letter, dated a few months later, he spoke of the loan as a debt that she was covering little by little with her savings. That she was me. I read those lines over and over until I understood what they meant. For years I'd been paying a debt I didn't know existed. I had financed my son's start without him knowing, or worse, pretending not to know. I shut the box with a thud. I felt a mix of fury and a sadness so old it almost felt familiar. I thought about how everything clicked. The silences, the evasions, Mark's condescending smiles every time we talked about money. How proud he was of having built it all from the ground up. From the ground up, yes, but on my shoulders. I poured the now cold tea and watched the steam dissipate, imagining the years I spent maintaining a balance that wasn't mine to hold. My whole life, I'd been the invisible glue of that family, the one who paid without asking, who cooked without being asked, who kept the secrets so the house wouldn't fall apart. And now, when there was nothing left to take from me, they erased me as if I were an old photo that no longer matched the decor. The phone rang and I jumped. It was Elsie. "Am I still alive or have you moved to a convent?" she said in her raspy voice. "I found Richard's letters," I answered, no preamble. And it seems I've been the bookkeeper of other people's sins my whole life." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Want me to come up? I've got wine." "Come, but bring 2 bottles just in case." When she arrived, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, eyes narrowed, cigarette dangling from her lip. "So they didn't just steal your party, they stole your story," she said at last. "But I'll tell you something, Clarita. People think women like us are finished, and they don't know we're dynamite wrapped in cotton robes." That line made me laugh for real, the kind of laugh that knocks the air out of you. "I don't know what I'm going to do, Elsie," I said later, calmer. "But I have to do something. Start by not warning them. Let them think they've got you under control. Silence, used well, is the best trap." We stayed up late talking, planning without a plan, warming our hands over the very fire that burns us. When she left, it was nearly midnight. I looked out the window. The empty street, the light reflections, the faraway sound of a TV in another apartment. I felt a strange calm, a stillness that had nothing to do with resignation. It was something else, a dangerous serenity. That night, I went to bed late. On the nightstand, beside the unfinished tea, I left a note that said, "Tomorrow I begin." I didn't know exactly what, but the word had weight. For the first time in a long time, the promise was to myself. The next morning I woke before the sun, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't peace. It was a kind of silent determination, an inner pulse telling me something was about to move. The house was still in semi-darkness, and while I set the kettle on the flame, I thought about everything I'd uncovered in the last 24 hours. The hall, the letters, the money, the gall. There was a line connecting it all, leading inevitably to the same conclusion. My whole life, I had been financing other people's comfort. That certainty, strange as it sounds, returned to me a strength I thought I'd lost. I took the first sip of coffee looking out the window, watching dawnlight slip timidly between buildings. It was a clear day, one of those when the air feels made of glass. I dressed with care, combed my hair, put on a perfume I hadn't worn in years, and stepped into the hallway. Elsie was watering plants, in her fuchsia robe, a cigarette lit in her mouth. "You've got a scary face on," she said without looking up. "When you wake up wearing perfume, Clarita, someone's going to get hurt." "No one yet," I replied, "but I'm done watching from the stalls." We went down to the sidewalk together, walked to the corner cafe, and ordered 2 buttered croissants. Elsie, as always, sat with her back to the door, because she said that way she could see people's faces in the reflection of the glass. While she stirred her coffee, I heard her say, "I told you yesterday, you have to make noise, fine noise, no scandals. You're one of those who speak softly and dismantle buildings." "I don't want to destroy anything," I answered, though I knew it wasn't true. "I just want them to understand what they did." "They won't understand," she said calmly, "but they'll feel it. And that, dear, is enough." We talked for almost an hour, and between her jokes and improvised plans, an idea emerged. I don't know if it was her mocking tone or her conviction, but suddenly it seemed as clear as that day's sky. If they had erased me, I would become an echo impossible to ignore. I went home with that phrase in my head, beating like a song. The first thing I did was sit at my desk. I pulled out all the bank folders, receipts, printed emails, and stacked them on the table as if preparing a stage. One by one, I reviewed them with the patience of an accountant from hell. Every figure, every signature, every automatic debit was a piece of my story. As I read, I realized something that chilled me. There were payments I didn't recall authorizing, small expenses, almost invisible, repeating every month. A transfer to Mark's firm, another to an account for a supplier I didn't know. It was as if my bank account had learned to bleed in silence. As I went on, my rage mixed with a kind of bitter lucidity. I understood that what they did with the party wasn't an accident. It was a habit. The habit of using me, assuming I'd always be willing to give, to be quiet, to hold things together. That idea pierced me like a needle. I took a blank page and wrote in the center, "No more." Just that, 2 words that felt as heavy as stones. In the afternoon, I called the hall again. Raoul picked up right away, with that friendly voice I already recognized. "Raoul, it's Claire Morris. I wanted to thank you for your help the other day." "Please, ma'am." "My pleasure." "Did you find your scarf?" "No, but I found something better. Self-worth." He laughed, not fully understanding. "Tell me, Raoul, do you also make videos of events?" "Yes, ma'am, sometimes." "Why?" "Because I need to record something, a kind of message, personal." There was a brief silence on the other end. Maybe doubt, maybe curiosity. "Sure, I can help," he said at last. "What's it about? I need to tell my version before others keep telling it for me." I hung up feeling a new calm, an almost physical certainty. The plan was taking shape, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim, but an author. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony. The city had that late afternoon hum that blends with fatigue. From there, I looked at the lit windows, the antennas cut against the sky, the cars stopped at traffic lights. I thought we all, in one way or another, live waiting for someone to see us, to hear us, to acknowledge us. I'd been invisible too long, and that invisibility had made me dangerous. As I drank the last sip, I heard my phone vibrate. It was a message from Sophie, my granddaughter. "Abu, I don't know if you're mad at me. I didn't know you weren't going to the party. I'm sorry." I sat a while staring at that minimal apology on the screen, that spark of humanity slipping in among so much hypocrisy. I didn't reply right away. I just typed one word. I know. Then I put the phone away, turned off the lights, and let silence fill the house. For the first time in many years, that silence didn't hurt. It was the space where I was going to start building something new. I didn't yet know if it was revenge, a lesson, or a goodbye. But whatever it was, it would bear my signature. Thursday dawned with an unbearable clarity. One of those mornings when the sun seems to mock you, as if it knew there are things still unsaid. I got up early, made strong coffee, and while the aroma filled the kitchen, I began to feel that impatience that runs through me when I have an idea I don't yet know if it's good or dangerous. I knew it was the day to do something. I couldn't keep reviewing papers or stockpiling anger. The moment had come to move, to use all that accumulated silence like lighting a very short fuse. I called Elsie, and without saying much, had her come over mid-morning. She arrived with her usual bag, a packet of cookies, and the bright look of someone who smells drama from afar. "Well, Clarita, tell me, what revolution are we starting today?" she said, taking off her dark glasses and setting her bag on the table. "A discreet one," I replied, "but unforgettable." I told her about the video with Raoul, how I'd decided to record something, not to expose myself or cry in public, but to tell my version. I didn't need the world to pity me. I needed the world, or at least my family, to know I am not the woman who lets herself be erased without a sound. Elsie stayed quiet, sipping coffee, then nodded slowly. "I like it. But don't do it alone. I'll go with you, so if your hands shake, I'll pass you the air," she said with a crooked smile. At 1 p.m, Raoul arrived. He brought a small camera, a tripod, and a box of lights. He greeted me with that mix of respect and curiosity of someone who doesn't know if he's part of a work of art or a revenge. "Don't worry, Mrs. Clare, whatever you need." "I just film," he said. "Perfect, Raoul. I just talk," I replied, and Elsie let out a laugh so loud the windows rattled. We moved the furniture, lowered the curtains so the light would be just right, and set the dining table like a little stage. Raoul tested the camera, adjusted the focus, and signaled me to speak when I was ready. I sat up straight, breathed deep, and began. I didn't improvise. I'd thought every word through in recent days, in the shower, while walking, even while sleeping. I spoke about how a woman can disappear from her own family without anyone noticing, how love, when given without measure, ends up looking a lot like servitude, how silences pile up until one day they weigh more than the memories, and I told the story of the party, in detail, without victimhood, just the facts, bare, like an invoice on the table. Halfway through, I saw Raoul lower the camera a bit and just watch me. Elsie, off to the side, had wet eyes, not from pity, but from recognition. When I finished, there was a long silence. Raoul asked if I wanted another take, and I said no, that truths are only told once. As he packed up, he looked at me with a mix of respect and awe. "I've never seen anyone talk about her own life like that," he said. "It was like someone who just woke from a long sleep." "That's exactly what I did," I replied. When he left, Elsie and I opened a bottle of wine and toasted. "And now what will you do with the video?" she asked, refilling my glass. "I don't know yet. But something tells me its moment will arrive on its own. Truths have a good nose for scandal." We laughed like two conspiring teenagers, and for a while I felt alive, light, owner of a story they could no longer edit. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to apologize or give anything back. What I wanted was to show them, without shouting or cheap revenge, the mirror of what they'd done. At night, when Elsie left, the silence returned to the house, but this time it didn't weigh. It had the texture of a promise. I put on soft music, sat by the big window, and thought of my husband, of how he would have reacted seeing me now. Maybe he would have laughed, maybe told me I was crazy. But I knew it wasn't madness. It was domestic justice. It was a way to put my memory and my pride in order. Near midnight, the phone vibrated again. It was Sophie. This time she wasn't apologizing. She just wrote, "Abu, I want to see you. Tomorrow I'll come alone." I answered with a simple, "All right," but felt a pang of tenderness. A crack was starting to open, and light was slipping through. I turned off the phone, breathed deep, and let tiredness win. I knew the hardest part was still to come, that Sophie's visit could bring new truths or old wounds, but I also knew I wasn't going to hide anymore. What had begun as an act of rage was becoming a kind of rebirth, and, without realizing it, as I fell asleep, I smiled, because after so long, I finally felt I was the one moving the pieces on the board. The next morning the bell rang just after 9, and for a second I thought it was the mailman, until I heard a soft voice on the other side saying my name with that mix of shyness and urgency only grandchildren have when they know they've done something wrong. I opened the door, and there was Sophie, standing with damp hair, a backpack on her shoulder, and the look of someone who doesn't know if she'll be hugged or thrown out. She didn't say anything, just came in and stood in the middle of the living room, looking at me as if searching my face for a sign that something still remained between us. I invited her to sit, put water on for tea, and silence settled like a third character in the room. She fiddled with her sweater sleeves, lowered her gaze, shifted and unshifted, until she finally dared. "Gran, I didn't know they hadn't invited you. I swear I didn't know. I thought you'd decided not to go. Mom told me you were tired, that you preferred to rest, and when I asked, she said you yourself had said you didn't want any fuss." I listened calmly, without interrupting, watching each word slide between guilt and confusion. "And you believed her," I said, not as a reproach but as a statement. "Yes," she admitted, "I believed her. And I feel like an idiot." I served the tea and let her talk. She told me how weird she'd felt during the party, that something didn't add up, that she noticed tension between her parents when someone mentioned my name, that the main table had an empty chair just in case, and that nobody explained why. She spoke fast, with that need to cleanse your conscience that young people have when they first face adult selfishness. I posted the videos without thinking. It was automatic, like I always do. And when I saw the comments, I realized what had happened. Everyone asked where you were. I was embarrassed, Gran. I swear I felt a kind of shame I didn't know existed. I listened and it hurt, but not because of what she said, because of what I heard between the lines. Deep down, she was the only one who still saw me. And that tiny gesture, that uncalculated loyalty, held me up more than I'd have liked to admit. "Sophie," I said at last, "you're not the one who needs to apologize to me. You did what all kids do. Trust. The problem isn't that you trust. The problem is that some adults use that trust as a mirror to hide their guilt." She came closer and took my hand, eyes shining. "Gran, what are you going to do?" she asked. "I already did," I answered. I recorded my version. I told her in detail about the video, the afternoon with Raoul, Elsie's look, the feeling of release. Sophie went mute for a few seconds, then smiled with a mix of admiration and fear. "You're a legend, Gran. But if they see it, they'll go crazy. Then they'll see it," I said. "That's the thing about truth, Sophie. It doesn't need permission to show up." We spent a while talking about unimportant things, her studies, her new boyfriend, how she wanted to move out. I listened with renewed tenderness, as if each of her words gave me back pieces of a youth that no longer belonged to me. Before she left, she hugged me long, one of those hugs that dismantle you without a sound. "I love you so much, Gran. Don't let them make you feel small," she whispered. "They can't anymore," I replied, and it was true. When she left, I stayed a good while staring at the closed door, knowing something in that visit had changed everything's course. It wasn't just my granddaughter's love that moved me. It was the certainty that the silence was about to crack in more places than I'd planned. In the afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice sounded tense, like he was holding back a storm. "Mom, can we talk?" he said. "No hello, no preamble. We've always been able to, son. Another thing is whether you want to listen." "Don't start, please. I've been told you're doing weird things." "Weird? That you recorded something? That you're talking to strangers? That you're, I don't know, unhinged?" I smiled where he couldn't see me. "Unhinged? I'm clearer than ever. Are you worried about my reputation or yours?" There was a long silence. I could picture his clenched jaw, his gaze turned elsewhere, that superior look he uses when he can't admit he's afraid. "Mom, don't do anything crazy. You don't realize you're not well." "Since the diagnosis." The diagnosis," I cut in. "How timely you mention it. The doctor called yesterday. There was a mistake. That report wasn't mine. I'm perfectly fine, Mark. Not a trace of dementia, except what I see around me." On the other end, I heard a quick gasp, a dull thud, like he'd thrown something on the table. "That doesn't change anything," he finally said. "Of course it does. It strips you of excuses." He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone and felt that, at last, the board was shifting. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't lost my calm, and yet I'd said more than I'd kept quiet in years. That night, I watched the video I'd recorded with Raoul again. I was surprised by the serenity of my voice, the precision of every word. It didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like a belated truth, an emotional invoice collecting interest. I thought of sending it, of showing it, of uploading it somewhere it couldn't be erased. But something in me decided to wait. Things, when ripe, fall on their own. I turned off the computer, turned off the lights, and sat on the couch. Outside, it rained, and the sound of water on the windows had a different music. It wasn't the noise of loneliness. It was the announcement that something was about to be cleaned, that the air was beginning to clear after a long, quiet storm. Saturday arrived with thick air, the kind you feel on your skin like a warning. I barely slept the night before. I spent the hours in a watchful calm, preparing in my mind each gesture, each word, each silence. I hadn't planned precisely what would happen, but something in me knew that day I had to close the circle. Late morning, I called Mark. His voice sounded dry, distrustful. I told him I needed to see them all, that I wanted to set things straight, that there was no resentment. I feigned perfect serenity, the kind of tone mothers use when they want their children to lower their guard. He agreed right away, perhaps relieved to think I was going to capitulate, to apologize for having overreacted. He said they'd come that night, bring dessert, and do a clean slate. I couldn't help laughing when I hung up. They thought they were coming to a reconciliation. They didn't know I was inviting them to my closing. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, but not out of anxiety. It was a ritual. Every movement had something ceremonial. I swept, arranged the books, washed the good china I'd had stored for years, and opened the windows to let in fresh air. I prepared a simple dinner, no frills, no decorations, without that effort to please that had exhausted me so often. While I cooked, I thought of my husband, the letters, how for years he too had disguised lies as good intentions. It was a family inheritance, the habit of dressing control in kindness. I swore I'd bury it that night with the last toast. At 8 sharp, the doorbell rang. First Sophie arrived, alone, with a bouquet of flowers. She hugged me tight, without a word, and I understood at once she knew everything. Behind her came Veronica, impeccable as always, and Mark, with his face of a tired lawyer who believes he's the victim of his own generosity. Then came Nora, the youngest, the only one who looked genuinely uncomfortable, eyes wet, hands restless. I welcomed them all with a smile that unsettled them. We sat at the table, and for the first few minutes it was a perfectly acted farce. Banal comments, empty compliments, tense smiles. "Mom, I'm glad we could talk," Mark said, breaking the ice. "I think we all needed this." "Yes, son," I replied. "I needed to see you too. All of you. Together." We ate in silence, or rather in that fake conversation that only serves to cover what seethes underneath. Veronica tried to seem kind, overly attentive, pouring me wine, asking if I was comfortable. I watched her, calm, like someone observing an insect in a jar. Sophie glanced at me now and then, searching my gestures for a clue, and I responded with a slight nod, a secret pact between generations. When they brought dessert, I used the movement to stand. I went to the sideboard and turned on the TV facing the table. None of them understood at first. They thought I was going to play music or a movie. But what appeared on the screen was my face, lit by the light Raoul had set up days earlier. My voice filled the room. I spoke calmly, with that serenity you only reach when fear is over. I said their names, spoke of omissions, of the party, of invisibility. There were no insults, no reproaches, just a precise list of facts. My children froze. Veronica was the first to react. "What is this, Claire?" she said, her voice cracking. "My version," I answered without looking at her. Mark stood up abruptly, as if to turn off the TV, but Sophie stepped in. "Don't you dare," she said with a firmness I didn't know she had. "It's her turn. Listen." On the screen, I recounted how I'd found the invoice, how they'd removed me from the group, how they used my money to celebrate themselves. Each word was a stab, but delivered without rage, only with that dignity that hurts more than any shout. When the video ended, nobody spoke. You could only hear the TV's hum and the wind slipping through the open window. Mark broke the silence first. "Mom, we didn't mean—" "I know," I cut him off. "You never do." Veronica put a hand to her mouth, pale. Nora lowered her head, ashamed. Sophie looked at me with pride and a new sadness. "I don't hate you," I continued, voice lower. "I just needed you to understand that I'm still alive, that I have a memory, and that I'm no longer going to let you treat me like a piece of furniture. If love isn't seen, it stops existing. And I'm tired of loving without being seen." No one replied. I asked them to pour themselves another drink. They did so in silence, obedient, like punished children. I raised mine. "Let's toast," I said, "to truths that arrive late, but arrive." We clinked glasses. The crystal rang like a dry bell. I took a sip and watched how Mark avoided my eyes, how Veronica twisted in her seat. In that instant, I felt all the weight of years peel off my back. I was light, free, intact. When they left, the house fell into a different silence, a clean one. Sophie stayed a few minutes more. "It was beautiful, Gran," she said with a tired smile. "Terrible, but beautiful." "It was necessary," I answered. "Some truths, if unsaid, make you sick." I walked her to the door and stayed alone, looking at the empty glasses on the table. On one of them, there was a lipstick mark, Veronica's. I wiped it away with my finger and tossed the glass in the sink. Then I turned off the lights and sat by the window. The night was calm. There was no guilt or revenge. Only a sense of closure, of having returned the blow without losing elegance. I thought of Raoul, of Elsie, of the camera, of Sophie. I thought of me. And I knew that, in some way, I had won. Not a victory people applaud, but an intimate, silent one, the kind that needs no witnesses. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to my small revolution. Inside, for the first time in a long time, I breathed without debt. The next morning I woke with a dry throat, and the feeling of having slept on a freshly painted truth, still wet. The house was in order, clean, intact, as if last night's scene had been a dream, but the smell of wine and the tipped-over glass on the table proved it had all happened. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sun fall over neighboring balconies. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I had done what I had to. I had given them back their own image, without shouting, without theatrics. But I didn't know the story wasn't over yet, that the echo of that truth would keep walking the world without my permission. Late morning, the phone started vibrating non-stop. First messages from unknown numbers, then calls I didn't answer. I peered at the device warily, and then saw the notification that explained it all. Sophie Morris has shared a video. A sudden chill ran through me, a mix of pride and alarm. I opened the link and found my own face on the screen, That recording I'd made with Raoul days ago, the one we had saved so carefully. The image was clear, the sound crisp, my voice calm, firm, ironic. "This is my version," it said. The story of a woman who paid for her own absence. The video had thousands of views, comments from strangers, hearts, messages of support, rage, tenderness. "That woman is me. We all have a Claire in the family." What a way to say things without insulting. Some read. I froze, phone in hand, feeling something like vertigo. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the sudden awareness that my voice had stopped belonging to me. Sophie had betrayed me without meaning to, or maybe she had freed me without knowing it. Minutes later, the landline rang. It was Mark, with the clipped tone of someone who just discovered the world turned against him. "What did you do, Mom?" he blurted as soon as I picked up, no greeting or breath. "Nothing," I replied, with that calm that always irritates him. "I told the truth. They uploaded it online. It's everywhere. Do you realize the damage this can do to me? I suppose the same damage you did yourself. This is madness. People are commenting on the firm's page. Clients are calling me. They're calling me to ask if I really left you out of your birthday." "And you?" "What do you tell them?" I asked, almost amused. "That it's not true. That you're ill." "Ah, we're back to that. I remind you the doctor already clarified the mistake. But if you want to keep lying, make sure the audience buys it." He hung up before I could say more. I stared at the phone, feeling a strange mix of compassion and relief. It wasn't revenge I felt, it was emotional justice, the kind that doesn't go through courts but weighs just the same. Hours passed and the story kept growing. Some local outlets shared the video under headlines I found a bit ridiculous. "The grandma who took elegant revenge. The story, behind the party with no guest." My voice replicated on hundreds of screens, and I, who never sought attention, found myself at the center of a conversation I hadn't chosen, but that, strangely, gave me back something like respect. In the afternoon, Elsie came by, as excited as if she'd won the lottery. "You're famous, Clarita. You've got more views than the president's speech," she said, flashing her phone. "I don't know if that's good or sad," I replied, laughing. "It's justice, darling. People needed a story like this. One that hurts and makes you laugh at the same time." We toasted with white wine, and between laughs, she told me even some neighbors had stopped her to say they were Team Claire. It seemed absurd, but also comforting. Life, after all, finds strange ways to balance the books. That night, Sophie called. Her voice trembled, but didn't sound regretful. "Gran, I don't know if I did the right thing. I posted it without thinking. I wanted people to know what they'd done to you." "I know, dear," I said. "And though it scares me a little, I think you did the right thing. Dad is furious. Mom isn't speaking to anyone. But lots of people wrote to thank me. They say your story made them think about their own mothers." "Then it was worth it," I replied, and it was like a weight lifted off my chest. We hung up quietly, and I stared at my reflection in the window glass. There was something new in that expression. Not pride, not sadness, not vengeance. It was a mature calm, the kind of calm that no longer needs to explain itself. The next morning, a local radio called. They wanted to interview me. I turned it down, not out of fear, but because I'd already said all I needed to say. I had no interest in becoming a public figure. I just wanted to keep drinking my coffee in peace, reading the paper, and knowing that at last my name sounded in my voice and not in someone else's. In the afternoon, I packed a bag. Not a big one, just a small case. Elsie rang the bell shortly after. "Where are you going with that face of freshly ironed freedom?" she asked. "To the coast," I said. "I need to see the sea, to confirm there's still something that depends on no one." "Then I'm coming. Fame must be celebrated, even if it means sand in the shoes." We left at dusk in Elsie's old car, windows down and a bottle of wine in the glove compartment. As the city fell behind, I felt a lightness I didn't know. The road seemed to open for us. That night we slept in a small inn facing the sea. The sound of the waves lulled me like a secret that didn't need sharing. On my phone, notifications kept coming, but I didn't open them. I didn't want to know how many applauded me or how many criticized me. I wanted to preserve that new silence intact, that perfect balance between a past closing and a future that, for the first time in years, didn't scare me. When I turned off the light, Elsie was already snoring, and I lay there a while staring at the ceiling with a smile that came easily. I thought about the party, the toasts, the flowers, everything they took from me and what I gave back to myself. I thought that maybe, after all, I hadn't lost anything. What they didn't erase me. It revealed me. And while the sea pounded the shore outside, I knew the tide had already turned, and what was coming now was, at last, mine. Sunday dawned with a silence that smelled of salt and beginnings. I woke before Elsie, with golden light slipping through the curtain of the small room and the murmur of the sea thudding in the distance like a patient heart. I lay still a while, listening to that sound that always reminded me of a loved one's breathing. There was something hypnotic in that rhythm, something telling me that, despite everything, the world kept working. The waves came and went without asking permission, and I, after so much noise, was finally at peace. I got up slowly, put on a coat, and went for a walk on the beach. The air was cold, the wind tangled my hair, and each step sank my feet into damp sand, but I felt more alive than I had in years. I walked aimlessly, letting memories mix with the cries of gulls and the crunch of the sea breaking on the shore. I wasn't thinking of Mark or Veronica, not even the video. I was thinking of me. Of the Claire buried under habits, caretaking, the endless patience they demanded of me. That woman no longer existed. When I returned to the inn, Elsie was on the terrace, smoking with messy hair and a cup of coffee in her hands. "Looks like you slept 20 years, Clarita," she said without looking at me, watching the sea like an old movie. "Maybe I did," I replied. "And I don't plan on going back to sleep." We laughed in silence. We spent the morning without talking much, sharing the kind of quiet that only exists between people who've already said everything. Around noon, my phone vibrated again, but this time I felt no anxiety. I pulled it from my pocket, and seeing the name on the screen, I smiled. "Sophie," I answered, and her voice came clean, bright, different. "Gran, where are you?" "I'm calling from the station. I'm on my way there." "Here?" "Yes, I want to see you. Don't worry, I brought something you'll like." I hung up with a mix of curiosity and tenderness. Elsie looked at me sidelong, one eyebrow raised. "Reinforcements coming?" "My granddaughter says she's bringing something. If it's another bottle of wine, we adopt her." 3 hours later, we saw her emerge from the midday mist, getting off the bus with a backpack and a box in her hands. She hugged me tight, with that clean energy only those who still believe everything can be fixed have. "I brought you something," she said, smiling. She opened the box, and inside was a small, simple cake with a candle stuck in the center. "This time the party is yours, Gran," she said, eyes bright. "And I'm paying." I laughed, not in mockery, but pure emotion, a laugh that bubbled up, unbidden, light as a song. Elsie applauded, theatrically, and Sophie lit the candle while the wind toyed with the flame. The three of us sat facing the sea, the cake on an improvised table, and when Sophie asked me to make a wish, I realized I had nothing left to wish for. Everything I'd wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be free, was already happening. I blew out the candle, and the smoke mingled with the salty breeze. There were no cheers, no photos, no music, but it was the best birthday of my life. Not because someone organized it for me, but because, for the first time, it was entirely mine. We spent the afternoon laughing, talking about small things, Sophie's plans, Elsie's idea of opening a little seaside cafe. Now and then my granddaughter checked her phone and told me the video was still making the rounds, that people kept sending messages of support, similar stories, women saying they felt accompanied by my words. Hearing that moved me, but in a different way. It wasn't vanity, it was relief, as if all that life I'd spent in silence had finally found its echo. Toward evening, Sophie dozed off on a lounge chair, and Elsie went for a walk. I stayed alone, looking at the horizon. The sun sank slowly into the water, staining the sky orange and violet. I thought of Mark, whether he was watching the same lights from his house, whether any part of him, even a small one, now understood what he'd done. I didn't feel rage, only distance. That sad calm that maturity leaves when it no longer needs revenge. The wind began to pick up, and I wrapped myself in a blanket. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the sea fill the spaces words used to occupy. I thought of everything that had happened in that week. The discovery, the humiliation, the revelation, the little domestic revolution. It had all happened so fast, and yet it felt like I spent a lifetime walking toward this silence. I opened my eyes just as the sun disappeared and thought of something I'd never said out loud. It's not about being invited. It's about knowing when to arrive on your own. I'd spent a lifetime waiting for them to make room for me, and in the end, I built it myself, with my hands, my voice, my mistakes. That night, the three of us dined, looking at the sea. Elsie toasted, as always, with white wine. Sophie held my hand, and I looked at her knowing that, in some way, the world kept turning, and that it didn't matter what others said, because I had recovered something much more important than respect. The freedom to be who I am, without asking permission. When we went up to sleep, the wind moved the curtains softly, and the smell of salt came through the window. I lay down with a tired body and a peaceful mind. Before closing my eyes, a phrase flashed like a spark. Sometimes to be seen, you have to disappear first. I smiled in the dark, because it no longer hurt. I disappeared, yes, but I came back. And this time, shining alone, shining for real. And that's how my story ends. At least, this part. If you made it this far, thank you for listening, for accompanying me in every silence and every word. Now I'm curious about something. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments, I want to read you. And if you liked my story, subscribe to keep sharing with me those truths we all keep quiet, but that, sooner or later, someone has to tell.